This meeting is being broadcast on the internet. And the guy who's responsible for that wishes to make a comment, and this would be a perfect time.
Michael Gordon, 27 River Street. I run the computer store next door. Today I noticed a couple guys walking around the outside of the building just to the next of me. I went outside to see what was going on. I noticed there was a Velvet Falls cruiser sitting right next to the road. By the time I made it over there, they were already inside the building. I waited for them to come out, and they were in plain clothes. And I asked them were they police officers, and they said that they were. And I asked them to identify themselves, and they said they didn't have to because they were in New Hampshire. I asked them for their name and badge numbers, and basically they just told me to get out of the way, and they got back in the car and left. Me personally, I got a couple issues with that. One, if I've been inside and saw somebody creeping around my house, like they were in plain clothes, I'm assuming they may have had firearms, but they weren't visible. That could pose a real safety issue for them and who is ever inside. And second, as a personal note, it kind of galls me that they're going to come from a different state over here and then say that we don't have to identify ourselves. That's all I had.
No, I can see exactly how you come to feel that way, and I will follow up with the local constabulary and either report to you privately or report publicly, depending on what I find out. But I will not accept a policeman from another jurisdiction coming into town without any notice to us and refusing to identify himself during the daytime.
I have a video record of this.
I don't want that. I want to do this with a job on. But thank you for bringing it to our attention. Any other comments on this particular topic?
I agree.
Good.
Me too.
Yeah, I was just going off on my own there. I should have asked you guys first.
That's all right.
You should be used to that by now. So, minutes. I wrote. Ms. Wilson.
Yes. Down in the paragraph when you talked about the top tax rate, I understand not everything can be put on is discussed, but it needs to be general. I guess where I'm seeing is like the selectmen decided that the fund balance would not be in use to offset the taxes, which is the last sentence. And I actually have no problem with that. What I really think should be in the minutes is that all three, one, I understand Rocky wasn't there, but all three of you had different opinions. And so I guess what I heard at that meeting, it wasn't recorded, I heard that, Joel, you mentioned Rock's opinion was $160,000. And then Chris, at my understanding at first, wanted to see all of it, but then said he would compromise to $100,000. And Joel, I think you wanted to leave it just the way it was. So at the very end, because I know it was a rush meeting, you had us leave. At the very end, you said it was a wash between you and Chris, that Rock, because he wasn't here, his opinion didn't count.
That's true. His opinion didn't count.
That's kind of a different issue because I feel...
That's a statutory issue, and you don't have to argue that with
No,
somebody
I'm not
else.
going to argue it. I just think it's kind of... Maybe shouldn't have even brought up his opinion.
No, that's fair.
No,
Because I don't feel, when you're not here, I don't feel the other two selectmen are disrespectful. So that's just my personal opinion.
Feeling disrespected?
But the last
It's the
sentence...
first of this I heard. I didn't watch it.
It wasn't on TV.
Wasn't on.
So we got away with all kinds of stuff.
And I
I
offer,
just feel that should be in the minutes so that people are aware where everybody stood.
okay, well, here's what I will motion that if there are no other amendments to the minutes, that we amend the minutes to indicate the vote and to include the motions, and I believe I motion to make it 100,000, or you would motion to make it 0.
Yeah, I'm not
There
gonna
was no motion. You said it was a wash.
Yeah,
That's how it came about. So when I'm looking at this going, there really wasn't a decision. Joel says it's a wash between the two of you because Rock didn't count. I don't see where it's a wash.
well, the end result would have been, with 2 selectmen present, 1 for, 1 against, it would the result wouldn't have changed without a third vote.
How about in a situation like that, why can't you make a phone call?
You're not allowed to vote by phone either.
Yeah.
But I think it should have been a compromise.
Well, I mean, we could have pushed it out a few days, couldn't we?
And that's not the message we were getting from staff, we'd already pushed it out 10 days.
Well, when was the deadline?
There's no deadline, but if you want your taxes back in,
Well, if there wasn't a deadline, you could have pushed it out.
And one could also argue that there was not a vote.
There wasn't a vote. I was here, there was not.
So what do you recommend, Ms. Wilson? Changing the minutes,
The
or?
selectmen did not decide that the fund balance,
I-
and I am trying to say, I actually, don't throw rocks at me, I agreed that I would have probably voted to leave it,
So,
and I'm a saver.
so maybe the last line should say, the selectmen were unable to reach a decision.
Yeah, I don't see where you where it was voted and decided to leave the fund balance.
So how about that for a moment, Chris?
Well, let me ask you a question. You have a question, you just want the can?
I want the can.
You could have figured that out without asking.
I thought I'd ask though. Have the results of that meeting been implemented? So it is too late to hold a vote at this time.
You could vote, but it wouldn't have any effect.
Right.
But if it's necessary to vote for people to register their positions in retrospect, then certainly we could do that.
Now, I think I would say, it was the consensus of the chair that there was no agreement on this.
That's true.
Is that appropriate?
It's fine.
If there were anything we could do about it at this point, I would recommend another vote. But it would be meaningless, it would be symbolic. My thoughts?
Well, I think it's important that the truth is put on here.
Yeah, I think we can state the positions, and then I do want to hear what Ann has to say. We could state the positions each took, and it was the consensus of the chair that there was no agreement, which there wasn't. Please.
At the session where the people come, can they voice an opinion then and make changes?
They can certainly voice an opinion, but they cannot change this one act.
Okay.
That was the core of our discussion last week.
Okay.
And that was my discomfort with the statute that says only the selectmen get to make this choice.
Yeah.
I don't want that, which is why I was advocating pushing it all forward into 17, which is what happened.
How does that change it to the people?
Because when you get to February, you and every other voter in the room gets to decide how much, if any, of that money gets applied to the warrant.
or the budget.
It doesn't. It could affect next year's tax rate, but it will have nothing to do with this year's tax rate. That, as Joel correctly states, is one of those few things that's reserved expressly for selectmen, and that's it. I'll let you.
It's a sort of a liberty issue for me, without being obsequious. I just don't think I should have that power.
Yeah, I don't either.
So I chose not to exercise it, even though all three of us had opinions that were remarkably similar about what should happen. But this one is overriding for me. So, at the risk of making the minutes one sentence longer, actually I'd strike the last sentence with your permission and say that we were unable to come to a decision. Chris?
Having sat in the meeting and observed what happened, it was my conclusion afterwards that the default position was that the money stays where it is.
Absent any action on the part of the select board, the money all moves to 2016. So we talk about it in January, we act on it in February if we choose to. And we means only the people who show up in February. And then everybody who can vote and chooses to vote in March gets to say yes or no about the individual applications, if any, of that fund.
And my impression of your conversation, yours and Chris's, over this issue was that was a vote, although nobody said I make a motion and nobody said I second that motion.
Sounds like I could have handled it better just the same. Yes, ma'am.
I think,
what Bobby wants is just that Rock had an opinion, you brought up that Rock had an opinion, and I think Chris tried to compromise a little bit by going to the 100,000 versus the 160, and then it was just voted out. I think she just wanted said that at least Rock had this opinion, Chris had this opinion, and there was.
Does she speak for you?
Do I speak for you, Bobby?
Yeah, I wanted the opinions in there, and the fact that it ended up there was not a vote. You stated it was a wash, and that nothing would be transferred. That's what you stated.
And that's what happened. And
Well,
that's
I'm
what's
just
gonna
saying
happen.
What I remember from the conversations, because I did not get to go the whole video.
In one sentence.
Then I will move that, for this.
Whatever Lynn is writing will be fine.
Yes.
I think
We accept the
we
minutes
probably are.
as amended.
Yeah, that'll do.
Does that work for you, Bobby? We okay with that? Including, she's going to include the notes of people's different opinions.
The select.
And that no agreement or
No
no.
agreement was reached. Yeah.
Cool. And speaking of which, we do have a non-public at 7. So I will be as efficient as I can. Most of this is news, I'm happy to say. And it doesn't require, I hope, a tremendous amount of discussion. Mostly my effort to keep people in the loop of the things that are going on in town. Did that boat landing meeting go off okay?
Did not make it more than 10.
So David was there. We'll get a report from him.
Yeah.
The boat landing meeting was part of that fish and game grant to do a demonstration project for erosion control, which was a small test pit that they control. Maybe it's something we want to learn more about.
Honestly, the boat landing, has nothing to do with that.
No, except that
It's not ours.
if we learn something from that experience that will make, say, Arbor Way more amenable to the neighbors, then that would be the way to do it. We could sort of go to school for free on somebody else.
That was what their hope was.
That is their hope, and that's also the Conservation Committee's hope. So, bridges. 2 guys from an engineering firm showed up in town more or less without an appointment and talked to me yesterday. They are going to send us a proposal that will include costs to design solutions for the 2 bridges we have on the red list. My thinking here is, actually I know both these guys because they both used to work for DOT when we were in bed with them for all those years. I think they're good guys, but my goal is simply to be better prepared with an action plan and some money in a capital reserve for that October day when we get the fax from Concord that says you can't go down that bridge anymore, or we're going to call your liability carrier and tell them to cancel your policy.
These guys, how do I put this? They will be proposing a real bridge solution as opposed to a temporary bridge solution.
They are hoping to be permitted to propose both.
Good.
And we can talk about that at another meeting, but the gist of it is if we design, if we pay them to design an in-house solution, which would be an echo of what's happening on Hill Road now, it would be a whole lot less money than if we pay them to design the state-of-the-art project that the state will, the only project that the state will fund 80/20. So that even the design for that project is more expensive, which makes sense to me because it's, it's a 70-year service life bridge, whereas nobody expects that from these temporaries.
So it would be a temporary bridge?
There's no proposal.
Okay.
There's only a proposal coming middle of next month for design services for 2 different directions we could go in as a community. And we could elect at that moment to go in both those directions, have both of those sets of plans ready to go. In the unlikely event that state bridge aid ever actually appears back on the horizon, we would be eligible for 100% reimbursement for the design costs and ready to go with bidding and building a bridge. So rather than having a stream crossing The one I'm worried about is on the Drewsville Road. We're all worried about that one because it's 220 trips a day. Rather than have that closed for 18 to 24 months, if we actually did a little prudent selectmening, we might be able to shorten that timeline by a whole lot. That's my goal. Can't promise that'll happen, but that's my goal. Insurance, we've had 2 meetings now with our full-time employees, and I think we're making some excellent progress on moving the community over to a circumstance that will avoid the Cadillac tax in 2018 and get us to high deductible HSA style plan, which is what I've been recommending for a while. And we had the second meeting yesterday, which was actually really nicely done with the presenters from Health Trust. And the guys seem quite positive about it. I'm going to meet with each of them individually to make sure that they understand, that we can work through any particular health issues that they have that might be affected by that deductible structure. And I expect to have that work done within 2 weeks. And that's all I got to say about that, except I think that's really terrific news. I'm pretty happy about it. Cell phones were being courted by another unnamed cell tower development corporation who specifically wants to take over the property on the top of Cobb Hill that now houses the sheriff department repeater and using the antenna, which is actually the old mast from the boom derrick that used to lift stuff out of the mine. And that does not belong to us, but we do have a 99-year lease on that piece of property with the Blanche Flower descendants. So I'm only telling you this because there's at least one family in town who's completely opposed to any cell towers whatsoever, and I'll reach out to them personally. But this will come to the planning board, not to the selectmen. And thanks to Rich, we have, I think, a pretty robust mechanism to protect the town from financial disaster if the tower falls over or the company goes bankrupt or the technology changes and the tower needs to go away. That's all I got to say about that. There's nothing going to happen in the next 6 weeks. Madame?
Question. You say that it's a 99-year lease. How specific is the lease? If you change the tower to a different, does it make a difference?
The proposal does not involve the town in any way. We lease the current structure. The promise of the developer is to provide 100% funding for a far superior and permanent structure with power backup that would improve the sheriff's radio service. I don't care about the sheriff's radio service. All of our stuff has already been moved. So we're where we're going to be for the next technological generation, however long it is. We being the town.
Will we lease that to the sheriff?
The Blanche Flower.
Lease that to the telephone?
Okay, that's what
I don't think
figured
anyone
out.
pays hands. I think they pay us in services, but we could find it out.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to whether the cell phone company actually pays who they pay, or they just develop it.
The cell phone towers, they pay the landowner.
They don't pay us.
Right, so they're paying Blanche Flower, okay.
I don't actually know who they're paying since Don is dead, but I'm sure they're paying.
Somebody. Okay.
So the developer's plan is simply to do that again, about 150 yards away, for a different company, for a different technology. We don't get to say no, we don't get to say yes. The planning board gets to guide the development. How tall?
I was just curious about the lease. If we lease, did we lease the land? Did we lease the tower? And if so,
We lease the land under the derrick
okay.
to put our radio stuff on.
And that's
It's not there anymore.
okay.
So we don't really have an interest or a dog in this fight as users, but we do through the planning board process, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And the planning board has some expertise at this now. Job descriptions. We have made some progress. Priscilla and I have established a guinea pig team, and we have already sent out our first 2 job descriptions for employee review. We're expecting comment back by Monday. And once we get those comments, we will sit down individually with those 2 guinea pigs and work through the comments. What's on this thing that you do? What's on this thing that you don't
For
do?
which department? Or
For admin. We're going to start with admin, then we're going to go to highway. what's on this thing that you do, what's on this thing that you don't do, what should be on this thing that isn't here, and what's on this thing that you really don't want to be doing, but we're making you do. No, I'm serious. I mean, those are the kinds of questions I'm going to ask, because that's how we do it. And we're looking at some staff transitions, so we have to pay attention to this stuff. Plus, it's what HR has been working on for a year, and we have to respect that too. So we've got some, I think, pretty good boilerplate starters for most of the positions in town, and we're going to work through them systematically. Just the two of us.
Could I, is it appropriate at this time to ask a question about the chief? Because when I was here 2 meetings ago, you said there was a glitch.
Not appropriate to ask me. Chris may wish to comment when we get down to the bottom of right here.
Okay.
And that is entirely up to you. Town administrator, Rich and I went over to Lineborough last Wednesday and sat through a very long meeting run by the town administrator over there, and it's fair to say that we were pretty impressed. And the selectmen in that town, which is exactly the same size as this one financially, I mean, within $20,000. And staff-wise, it's very similar. So the selectmen over there are absolutely certain this was the right thing for them to do, and they came to it through disaster. They didn't come through it consciously with a sense of purpose, and that's not what we intend to do. But we also aren't going to wait for the disaster. We're going to propose to the town that we take a systematic approach to trying to decide if this is a good move for us. Not that the selectmen are going to put something on the warrant that says fund this and we're going to go. We're going to start with an analysis. Yes, ma'am.
Question again.
Another question? What's your budget?
Is Lineborough's a full-time job or part-time?
Looks to me like it's way more than a full-time job. But it has a surprisingly small salary and benefits package associated with it. Less than the cost of a police chief, for instance. It has a professional degree and certification package that comes with it. So, so I think it's a real profession. It's not, they didn't hire somebody's brother-in-law from town. They had a search and...
Well, because I know Stoddard has it part-time, I believe, and there's some others. Yeah.
Is that Jim Coffey?
Jim Coffey. I know Jim. He's from New Ipswich. I used to live in New Ipswich years ago.
So the subtext of that is that there's two reasons for towns to entertain the notion of having a town administrator. And they both could be true at the same time, and I will leave it to the voters to decide if that's the case here. But one is that selectmen are doing a crappy job, or coming up short too often. And the other is to save money. The Lineborough selectmen can do chapter and verse on how much money this guy has made him or saved him. By shopping smart, by the best example I can come up with is a one-time cash infusion of $130,000, where this guy came to town as a professional town administrator and said, hey, how long and how come you guys are paying Social Security on your cops' wages? We don't do that in New Hampshire. Not for full-time anyway. So they got a check from the Social Security Administration for $138,000. It took 6 weeks. You only got to do that once a year to be a hero. So
This town does do that.
this town does not and has not paid Social Security. We don't get any more questions. So here's the scary part of that meeting. By accident, I happened to show up on exactly the same day that two guys in suits showed up from the firm in Hampton that administers our trust funds for the library and for the town. And they were coming there to get a beating and to plead mea culpa because they had been sanctioned by the SEC for neutrally poor marketing practices. More accurately, perhaps, making promises about returns that could not ever be substantiated by facts. They got fined a bunch of money. The president either got fired or quit or went to Cuba with a suitcase. I was going to get ready to panic, and then I figured out that they were meeting the next day, which was a week ago Thursday, with Terry Knowles, who's a woman I greatly respect, who works for the Attorney General's office and is the supervisor of charitable trusts, which is what we are. And so all I did was bring this event to the attention of the trustees of the trust funds and the trustees of the library, both of whom had received a communication about it. So this was not
So
like,
they were
this was
aware.
not like me being the hero and riding into town saying the barn's on fire. They knew about it. I'm not sure they took it as seriously as I did, but in the end, it doesn't matter because Terry Knowles is on the case, and I have since received a communication from her that says, oh yeah, I met with these guys, and as soon as I have something to say, I'll be in touch. And of course, what I wanted to say is this outfit viable or not? I then contacted the SEC, and my guy there that I went to high school with isn't a great thing. He said, you know, you could ask for all your money and your fees back. You might have